Hello, Keatron Evans here again. This course is designed to give you hands-on instruction navigating the Windows command line. Most of you are probably running Windows operating systems at home, so you should be able to follow these instructions using your own computer. Remember though, if you're using a work computer or even using your home computer at work, make sure you get approval from your company to run these commands. Now what's going to happen is we're going to have you do some basic tasks, things that you already know how to do using the Windows GUI or the Windows interface that you normally interact with, where you click the start button, you open folders and files and things like that. We're going to get you up to speed to where you can at least do those basic things from the command line. This will set you up perfectly so that when you do take a cybersecurity boot camp or some other course, you're not completely new to the command line, and it gives you that comfort level to where as we start to give you more complex commands to run, you're okay with doing that. Let's go ahead and look at the rest of the course. So what will we be covering? The Windows command line, point and simple, it's nothing more complex than that. And what is the Windows command line? Well, it is essentially the brains and power of the Windows operating system. It's how you access most of the operating system, and you're able to actually do things via the command line that you can't do any other way. Now, you won't be getting too much into those things in this introduction, but it will give you an idea of just how powerful the command line could be. Let's move on and get started with the demonstrations. So if you go ahead and just clear your desktop to where you're looking at your Windows desktop like I'm looking at mine here, we're going to first do something very, very basic, and then we're going to follow up and show you how to do that exact same thing using the command line. And this is again designed to get you comfortable with the command line. So we're going to go into a folder that you generally have access to. Go ahead and open your Windows Explorer. And whenever you hear me say Windows Explorer, I just mean open a folder somewhere. Okay. And what we're going to navigate to or go to is on your computer, go ahead and click the Documents folder. Right. And you have your own things in the folder. I've got some things of mine in the folder. But what we're going to do is we're going to do something very easily, something that we commonly do here. So with that open, go ahead and click on your desktop. Now right click, select New, and then do Text Document. And what should happen is it should populate a new little text document there with the blue shading to indicate that it doesn't have a name, so it's going to use the default name. Let's go ahead and name this file. Let's just name it File 1. And once you type File 1, just click anywhere on your desktop and it will name it File 1. And repeat that step, right click again, go to New, select Text, and we're going to create a second text file. And we're going to name this one File 2. Okay, so what we just did is something very simple and something that we commonly do. We created a file on the desktop and we named it something. So now we're going to drag and drop File 1 into the Documents folder that we have open here. So do that by simply selecting it, holding down your left click, and then just dragging it over and dropping it into your Documents folder. And you'll see now File 1 has now been moved to the Documents folder. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our command line now, and we're going to get File 2 into the same Documents folder, but we're going to do that by learning about Windows directory structure and also learning about how to navigate it. So to get to the command line, you can either get there by, in your search bar, down here at the bottom left, typing CMD. It should bring up for you a little black icon that says Command Prompt App. This is one of the most common ways to access the Windows command line. All right, go ahead and click that to open your command prompt. And as you can see for me, it put me in my C users KEvin directory. Now let's talk about what's going on here for just a second. When you log into Windows with your user account, Windows creates for you a home directory or a user profile directory that's designed specifically for you to put your stuff in. If you look, it's right off of C, so C drive, consider that to be the bottom of your drive or the root. And then there's a branch off that called users, and then there's a branch off that called Kevan. That is my profile folder, which is where most of my stuff goes by default. Now within my profile folder, if I do a, for example, dir, you can see the documents folder inside there and the downloads folder. So what we want to do is change to the documents folder. And we do that by simply typing the command cd space documents. All right. Now, a quick little command line trick here. If we wanted to go back to the previous directory or go back one directory, we could simply type the command cd space ... like so, and that takes you back to the directory you were previously in or one directory higher than you were. So what we want to do now is we want to figure out how to copy the files that are on the desktop into this particular folder that we're in documents, or we were in documents. So let's change back to documents, do a dir, and verify that we can see file 1 in there. Now, notice when you do dir, it doesn't show you all of the files that you think might be in there. A couple of things you want to look out for. One is you may not be in the right directory. Well, how do you find out what the current directory of a file is? Well, go back to your documents folder in your Explorer, right-click your file 1, and select properties. Now notice on mine, it actually stored my stuff in my OneDrive. And this is something that those of you that are buying new computers, you're going to run into, where OneDrive is kind of accessing things and, kind of putting you in places that don't have anything to do with your actual machine. What this is referred to is you're not able to go directly to your path that's on your actual machine because OneDrive has got you in another directory. And the reason I bring this up and show this is because as I've helped my family members and friends troubleshoot why they can't find their files, this has turned out to be the most common reason. So let's go back again, look at Windows Explorer by opening your folder. This time we're going to go to the drop down that we see here and just type in there C:, and hit enter. And again, that is C:, that's the letter C, a full colon, and then hit enter. What you'll see as a result of that, most of you will see the same folders that you see on my machine. If you've done a lot of installations, put new programs on, reconfigured your system, it may be a little different, but one thing that should be there no matter what is the users directory right off of C. Go ahead and double click that. And now you should see your user context folder. If your name is Jason, for example, and your computer login is Jason, then you would see Jason here. In my case, my login is Kevan, so my folder is Kevan. Go ahead and double click that folder. And then in that folder, you will see a documents folder. And if you notice now, my documents folder is empty. So now we're going to drag file 2 into this documents folder because we can look at the path up top and see that we're actually in our true documents folder, not that whole OneDrive folder stuff that we saw in the beginning. Now, if you've never had issues with OneDrive, you won't have needed to worry about the first step. However, now if it comes up in the future, you know what the problem was. So now let's go to our command line. And if you haven't changed anything, you should still be in your documents folder for that user context, and do a dir again. And you should see that now file 2 actually shows up in there, whereas it didn't before, because we just moved it in there. All right. Now let's do something interesting. What if we wanted to copy file 2? How would you do that here? Wouldn't you just right click it, say copy, and then right click again and say paste? Right? That's how you do that. What if you wanted to rename the file 2 copy to something else? Let's rename it to file 3. Well, you would select it like so, and then you would just type in whatever you wanted to name it. Let's just call it file 3. Let's go back to the command line. Do a dir command again to show you what's in there, and you should see file 2 and file 3. So we just did a very common task. We just renamed a file. What if I wanted to name file 3 file 4? How would you do that? Well, we have a rename command in Windows. So go ahead and type the command rename, then select file 3 or type file 3, and then do space file 4 and see what happens. It says the system cannot find the file specified. Why do you think that is? This brings us to something called extensions. Okay. In the world of Windows, extensions mean everything. In the world of Linux, that we'll learn later, extensions mean absolutely nothing. They mean nothing to the Linux operating system, but in Windows, they matter. So let's do our rename command again. We're going to do rename. And this time we're going to include the extensions, which is the part after the dot. We're going to do file 2.txt, and then we're going to do file, actually, sorry about that. We're going to rename file 3 to file 4. Like so. And notice it didn't give us that weird error message. And now if we did a dir, you'll see that file 3 has been renamed to file 4. Now, the reason I'm having you create text files and play with renaming and messing with them is because I don't want you to start messing with files that are on your system that maybe are there for a reason, or files that are important to you. We're kind of creating files for you to play around with and get comfortable with without you being able to mess anything up. So what we've learned there is the option of renaming a file from the command line as we would have done via the GUI here. And that's kind of the point of the whole command line exercise. The next thing, what if you didn't know how to use the command rename? How would you learn how to use rename? Well, actually, Windows has extensive help libraries or help files. So if you just type the command rename without any arguments, it's going to say the syntax is incorrect. You don't really know how to use me, so I'm not going to do anything. But if we did rename and then perhaps question mark, what does that do for us? Absolutely nothing. Well, how would we get help for the rename command? So as it turns out, rename is one of the old DOS commands that have been around since there's been a DOS operating system. And what you can do is you can actually go into your help file. You can just type the command help, and it shows you a list of all the DOS commands that you're able to run. One of those is rename. Right? Now, all of the commands that I'm going to show you in this particular short course is going to be from this help file. You'll be able to go to just type help and go look up what each of these commands are. Now, another common scenario, if your screen is full like that and you want to get back to, let's say, a clean screen without completely starting over from scratch, how do we do that? Or how do we do that without typing a command like dir? Well, the command is cls, which is short for clear screen. So go ahead and type that, and what it does for you is it clears your screen and gives you all of your screen real estate back for you to continue to type commands in. Right? Now, what have we just looked at? You saw how to move a file from one place to the other, but we now need to look at some shortcuts to kind of make things easier for us. Let's go back to our first command. Let's do cd ... to take us back to C users Kevan. If you wanted to change to the documents folder without typing the full documents command out, and this is one of the little tricks that you don't learn until later in your cybersecurity life, but it will be an absolute time saver, and it can make you much swifter at what you're doing, and it takes away your problem with the typos. There's something that's built into Windows and Linux and Mac OS X called autocomplete. And what that means is if I type the command cd and then I do capital DOC, and watch closely, I'm going to hit the tab key, it auto completes the string documents out for me. So what ends up happening is now I don't have to remember or type out that long string. So I can just hit enter and it takes me there. Now let me show you where this is really useful. Follow with me here. Make a directory using the command mkdir. And the directory name I want you to make is just type a bunch of random characters and numbers like so, and then hit enter. And it can be any random pattern that you'd want to type there. Now, if you do a dir command after doing that, you'll see that your long, weird directory name exists there. Let me ask you this. If I asked you to change directories and change into this weird directory, do you want to sit here and type out the command DSLKAF? No, you don't. Why? Because it would take you a long time. But what we just looked at is something called autocomplete. So if I type the command cd DSL, because there's only one file or folder that starts with that string, and hit tab, it auto completes that for me. Now, can you imagine if you have to type that out, or you have to go into 10 or 12 directories like that per hour? How many hours a day you're probably wasting just typing commands and typing out file names? This is where autocomplete will save you. And I absolutely encourage you to start practicing this now, because when you see us doing demonstrations, by the end of this course, I'll be doing some pretty complex hacking demonstrations and things like that. You'll notice it looks like I'm going really fast, and how does he know all these commands? How did he remember these commands? The secret is I didn't, because probably 80% of the commands that you see me entering when I'm doing reconnaissance or exploiting a machine are commands that I'm tabbing, and the system is auto-completing those. My brain is not occupied thinking about typoing that command, because I know my tab complete is going to work for that specific part of the command. So my brain is free to be thinking about the next step in that hack or in that reconnaissance operation or whatever it is. And this autocomplete is one of the main things that I see beginners missing when they come into cybersecurity, trying to get on the command line and follow someone like me or someone else that can, fluently go through these commands. Well, the difference is you won't keep up with me because I'm using autocomplete and you're not. It's a simple matter of math. If you have to type all 17 of these characters to type that directory, and I have to type 3 of them, you're probably going to lose that race of who's going to get to the end first. So therefore, it slows you down as you become more advanced. The more advanced things you're asked to do, the more you're going to need things like autocomplete. So I wanted to introduce this right away as we got into the command line so that we can use it going forward. And I will quiz you as we go throughout this to kind of tell you Well, we can type this command out, or what's another way we could do it? And I'm expecting you to kind of know that you can use autocomplete. Now, what if I told you to go back one directory? We'll do cd ... for that. And then I told you to go into the downloads directory, which is off the Kevan directory. You would go cd space DOW, and I hope you'd hit tab and autocomplete downloads. But let me show you an even shorter shortcut. What if I now reverse that? Let's do CLS for clearing the screen. What if I reverse it and said cd back to Kevan and then cd into documents again? Go back to documents. Well, another thing you could do is you could say cd space ... backslash DOC tab, right? I didn't type documents out. I just did DOC tab and hit enter. And it takes me right back one directory and then jumps me right into documents. Another little shortcut that as you're a beginner and as you come into using the command line, these are things that are going to make you much, much more efficient on the Windows command line. Now, why is this useful? Well, let's say I hack into this machine from a Linux machine, I'm going to need to know these basic Windows command line techniques for me to be able to do anything useful to that operating system. Otherwise, it becomes kind of a waste of time. All right. So let's look at a few other things. Let's do help. Remember, help gives you a list of all the commands that are available to you right from the DOS prompt. And we can see some others. Now, whether or not you've been in computers or been using your computer for a while, one of the things that you may have done before is try to take a look at the processes that are running on your machine. Most of you probably know to do that by going and typing Control-Alt-Delete and then hitting the button that says Task Manager. So let's see what happens if I do that. If I do Control-Alt-Delete, right? So that's on your actual keyboard, hit Control, hold down Alt and hold down Delete. It pops up this screen. If I hit Task Manager, it actually shows me all the running processes that are running on my machine. All right, and hopefully everybody's tracking on that. Now, the title of this course is Command Line. So you know what I'm about to ask. How would I look at these running processes just from the Windows command line? And if your answer is type the command task mgr, that's not quite what I'm looking for, because let's look at what that gives you. If from the command line, I type the command task mgr, and I want to show you something that's not listed as one of the basic commands, but if I type it, task mgr, it indeed opens the task manager and lets me see running processes. But what I'm asking is, how do I see these processes from the command line without still opening the GUI application? Well, the answer to that is there's a command named task list, and that is in our list here, and it's right here. Right? So we can type the command task list, and it shows us all the running processes. So it's like Task Manager on the command line. Now, what if I further told you that I want to see all these processes, but I want to see just the OneDrive processes? I don't want to see anything else with OneDrive. As a matter of fact, since you may not have OneDrive running, do something for me. From the command line, let's launch a process. Type notepad.exe, and you should see that it opens up a notepad blank document for you. Go ahead and minimize that document. And from the command line again, type task list. And in your resulting list, see if you can find Notepad. It'll probably be towards the bottom, but see if you can find Notepad like I've got it right here on mine. Now notice my process notepad.exe is here, but I have to look through all this other stuff to see it. Well, the question should be, well, how do I look at the running processes but only see Notepad? How can I filter out all the rest of that? Somebody once said to me when I was showing them this, they said, well, yeah, you can take that, copy it and put it into a Word document and then, search for Notepad in your Word document. So you want me to create an entire document in an entire new application just to look for a specific string? No, let's look at the command line way to do this. We can type the command task list. All right. Now, some of you Linux people are going to really hate the fact that I'm showing Windows people this. But in the world of Linux, we use something called grep, which allows us to only see strings that meet the criteria that's in our grep operation. Well, we don't have the grep command in Windows, but we have something that's very similar called find string or find str. And what that's for is if I say, give me task list, however, I'm going to pipe. And if you don't know what that is, that's the key that's above your backspace, like your shift backspace. And we're going to say find str notepad. And what you get as a result of that is instead of seeing all the running processes, you only see notepad. And this is going to be very useful as you progress in your career. When I tell you to take a system and look for specific indicators of compromise, of malware, and things like that, there might be certain strings or certain processes that I'm going to have you look for. And if you don't have the find string technique down, you will be stuck with trying to copy it to another program and search through it that way. We can do this a lot of ways. I can look for other things. I can say, for example, show me only things that have the string Windows in it, and then I can find those. Or maybe I'm looking for command lines. We've got a command.exe that we're running in here. Well, what if I want to see how many command.exes there are? There really should only be one. If I did this and I saw that there was like 50, I would be scared because there's probably something wrong, right? So even though this is a fundamental command, and if you look, if we do help again, all right, it is a fundamental command. It's still extremely useful. Now, I didn't just know this off the top of my head. It's actually right there. Tells us exactly how to do it. Tells us exactly what it's for. So that's how I would actually do that. Now let's do something a little more complex. What if I decided that I wanted to stop this notepad process? How would you stop that? How many of you would say go to file and then go to exit? Because that's one way to stop notepad. What if I just hit the X up here? That's definitely a way to stop it. And you're probably familiar with that. Or this is command line. So how do we stop it from the command line? Can we stop notepad? Like we could find the process using this command that we did earlier, right? And that tells us it's right there. And then how do we stop it? Well, we know the process number is 3316. That's called the process identifier. What I could do is I could invoke another command that's similar to task list called task kill. Now I can do / PID. PID stands for process identifier, which is this number in the case of my notepad. Your number is going to be something different. Okay. And then I can do that number 3316. And now I have to do a / F for force. If I execute that command, what you see happening is it says the process has been terminated. And if you notice in my tray here, notepad is no longer running. So now if I did the find string to look for notepad again, it doesn't come back with anything because we just killed that process from the command line. Right? Now, another real world use of this, if you've ever had to troubleshoot malware, there will sometimes be stubborn processes that if you go this way and you go into Task Manager and you find the process and you want to kill it, you might find it when you go and right click it and try to say end task, like some of you've done before, it just won't end. It's stubborn. What you'll find is oftentimes if you go to the command line and do what we just did with this operation, like that, it'll kill the process when you weren't able to kill it before. Now, again, these are Windows command line foundations. These are things that if you master and practice them, when you move into actual cybersecurity, these things are going to be very, very useful to you because this is going to be a large part of it. Now, doesn't matter if you're going into pen testing or you're going on the defensive side and doing forensics or incident response or something like that. Having these skills are going to be tangible to whatever that practice is. All right. Now, let's look at a few more commands. You know how to look at running processes. Well, what if your boss told you, great, you can look at the running processes. I want you to write those into a file that I can read in Notepad. Let's stay within the Notepad universe here. Well, in Windows, you can do something called redirect. So we can do task list, which will list all the processes. And if we just enter that, it's going to print it to the screen. So what you can do is you can say task list, do the little is greater than symbol, and just create a file name. Let's just call it stuff.txt. All right. Now, if we look in that directory, you should see that there's a stuff.txt. And if we open that with Notepad, so let's just do Notepad space stuff.txt. Now, should you type stuff.txt all the way out? Nope. You really should do stu tab. And then if you go ahead and open it, you will find that instead of the list of processes being written to the screen, you've now written them to a file that you can email someone or something like that. Now, why is that useful? Because I might say that machine may be infected, get a list of everything that's currently running on it and email it to me. Now you've taken those processes, written them out to a text file, and you're able to email it. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, I could just take a screenshot, but if you did that, if it's a long list of processes like this, a screenshot's only going to give you some of them, right? So there's real value in being able to write these things out to a file. Now, these are fundamentals that if you practice is going to help you do a lot of other things as it relates to the Windows command line. When we get into pen testing, when we get into threat hunting and other things, using the command line to navigate and do these basic things is important. But what I'm really pushing for here is that you just practice the things that we just did so that as we progress with these, you'll become more comfortable branching out and doing other commands, right? So what we're going to do next, and this will be our final little exercise here, is we're going to figure out a way to get rid of the files that we created. Okay, so let's do dir to get a list again. You can see we got our file 2, we got our file 4, and we got our stuff.txt. So how do we get rid of those? Well, it's a couple of ways. We could actually simply type the command erase. Let's do file 2 first. And we do a dir again, and you can see that file 2 is now gone. Okay. Now I want to show you something. Go ahead and open stuff.txt in Notepad. You can just type the command notepad stuff.txt. Now leave that open in Notepad and go back to your command line just by clicking on it. And let's do erase stuff.txt. What do you think just happened there? Because you had it open and then we were able to erase it. So if we open it and then we close it, or if we close it while we have just erased it and we do a dir, the question is it still there? So we do a dir and we see that stuff.txt is no longer there. But if we go ahead and try to open it, it's not there. So it just creates a new one. This is a situation that people catch themselves in a lot of times where you can have a file open. Let's just open file 4, which is blank, but we'll open it anyways. And something will happen to that file while you've got it open, and you think you're good because you got it open. But guess what? When you close it, if you don't save it separately, that file ends up being gone somewhat forever. Now, we're not going to get into a forensics discussion, but for all intents and purposes at this level, it's gone forever. All right. So let's think about the command line things that we just looked at and the things that I want you to practice so that when you go into the other techniques, because we are going to get into some more advanced techniques with securing Windows and all that, these skills are what's going to make you not feel so nervous or terrified when you get on that command line. So a couple of commands that we've entered. We've entered dir, show us what's there. We've entered copy. We've entered rename to change the name of a file. We've also entered task list to get a list of running processes. We've entered task kill to kill a process. And we've also, for example, typed mkdir to make a directory, to create a directory. And we made that really long directory name that we have here. All right. Now, do you think erase will work if we want to erase that directory? Let's try it. Let's try erase DSL tab. And it says, are you sure? And the reason it asks us that is because directories could have other things inside them. So it's saying, are you sure you want to get rid of this directory? Well, interestingly, if we say Y for yes and hit enter, and we do a DR again, notice it didn't actually erase it. Because what it really interpreted you to mean was you want to erase whatever's inside that directory. Now, in the Windows command tree, if I do help, there is a command up at the top here, because these are alphabetical. There's a del command, which is delete. Okay, so if we enter del for that directory and say Y for yes, and now we do a DR, it still appears that it didn't go away. So what do we do here? How do we get rid of these stubborn directories? All right, what if you did del tree? Why didn't that work? And I bring this up because this is what Linux people will usually tell you to do. Well, because now we've run into a situation to where we have a critical operation that we're trying to do here, get rid of a directory, and the command that most people know to do that, which is del tree, doesn't actually work in the context of Windows because that's not a Windows command. Now, we're going to look at some other techniques that we can use for doing this to get rid of this folder. When you do help, the main thing is as you get ready to move into taking these courses, these more advanced courses, I want you to start looking through here and seeing if you can figure things out for yourself, because del trees Linux, that didn't work. Del didn't work. Erase didn't work. If you're looking through this list, do you see anything in here that looks like it might be sufficient for deleting a directory? And again, trying to challenge you to find things for yourself. Well, as you look down the list, scanning it, something should jump out at you. Says rmdir means move directory. That sounds a lot like exactly what we're trying to do. So let's try that one. So let's do rmdir, and then let's do our long directory here. And then we do a DR again to see if it's there. And now we finally got rid of it. So look, I know what remove directory is. I know the differences, and I could have just told you, but I wanted you to see what it looks like and what the process is. This is how you teach yourself. You tried to do something, you tried to do something else. Maybe you Googled, how do I delete a directory? And the first result that came back was del tree because it was from a Linux terminal or Linux portal or something like that, or a Linux user group. But then we looked in the help file, we found out how to remove a directory in Windows. And really, this is what it's all about. Where you're going to get most comfortable is not just doing these commands, but teaching yourself how to learn these commands, right? So hopefully that little basic Windows command line tutorial was useful for you. Practice those commands and go through and read the others. And remember, the most important thing is if you're doing this on your computer at home, you're probably fine. But if you're doing it on a work computer, get permission from your corporation or your supervisor before running any of these commands. Remember, for more content of any courses that I teach, you can reach my course page at this particular link that you see on the screen here, infosecinstitute.com/authors/Keatron-Evans.